Hi folks, I'm Alan Watts and this is Cutting Through the Matrix. I was thinking about all the other things that are happening right now with the enviro taxes that are coming down the pike, the carbon trading, right down to you being billed for your carbon usage, estimated according to how much energy you use, electricity and so on. And eventually you're going to see rationing on gasoline and various other things as they all get into your little region where you can move around in, but you'll be unable to use private transportation according to the United Nations Agenda 21. All this stuff is out there for those that want to look at it. Most folk don't want to. Most folk don't really want to look at this. Even people who are going crazy with the internet, and some people are going crazy. I get crazy emails all the time. Because yesterday, for instance, I'll give you an example. I read about the Weather Warfare Treaty, and I didn't use the UN site. And some guy emailed me up and says, well, I couldn't find it anywhere. Meanwhile, I've downloaded everything from the UN sites on weather warfare, because they update the treaty every year, or every couple of years. And the guy said he couldn't find it. Well, I can't be his nanny, you see. And he's probably too busy looking in 100 different directions for other things at the same time. He can't concentrate on one thing. So there's a downside to information overload as well. But taxes everywhere. Now there's also a Tobin tax. You've heard the name floated once in a while for those that still have memory. And people really are losing their memories. They've just forgotten that we had the flu scare there and we had billions of dollars thrown at it and it didn't exist and now it just faded away. But it's officially, by the way, been announced that it's over. I hope you understand that now. You would be the sigh of relief that it's over, that the non-event is over. And before that, you just got suckered by the banks that collapsed supposedly with trillions of bucks as well. But that's all forgotten now as well. The Tobin tax has been floated many times, and it's a world tax. This article is about that. It's from the New American, 8th of February 2010. For decades, the Tobin tax, a proposed global tax on currency transactions, has remained far from economic mainstream thought, being primarily the hobby horse of left-wing academics and advocates of world governments such as the World Federalists or communist dictators such as Fidel Castro. The past few years, however, has seen a host of Tobin-type proposals coming from more establishment sources. In the past few months, it's been boosted by liberal left economists Paul Krugman and Robert Kuttner, as well as French President Nicolas Sarkozy, French Foreign Minister Bernard Kouchner, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, European Commission President José Manuel Barroso, the European Council, Greek Prime Minister George Papandreou, who is also president of the Socialist International, by the way, and the UK's Financial Services Authority Chairman Lord Adair Turner. Advocates of the Tobin tax, named for the late Yale economics professor and Nobel laureate James Tobin, suggest a tax on foreign currency transactions would engender international currency stability by discouraging speculation. Now, what it actually does too is pass the cost of every transaction of the goods which are imported and then sold to you all the way down to you, because obviously the big boys have to pass it down. They don't want to pay it. They only pass it on down to the guy at the bottom. It means all of you, because everything now is imported. And it says some politicians like Gordon Brown and Venezuela's Hugo Chavez have pushed for Tobin taxes at the national level. However, as the British journal The Economist noted, unless a Tobin tax were implemented worldwide, trading would move out of any country that enforced it. Tobin proponents differ greatly on the optimum rate that should be charged, which is expected, since the line between speculating and investing is largely subjective. Some Tobin tax advocates propose simplifying things by levying a tax not only on foreign currency conversions, but all security transactions. With tens of trillions of dollars in transactions taking place, that raises the possibility of raising hundreds of billions of dollars annually in new tax revenues. Voila, suddenly the Tobin tax is transformed from a stabilizing tool into an almost inexhaustible global source of revenue. Remember, the whole deal too is to get the UN up to its proper status. because that's where it's supposed to be, is not just it's never been a negotiating table, believe you me. It's been an advocatory, a system set up for advocating all the global policies to bring them into world government. That was its function, but it needs the cash to do so, and it's going to get a lot already through all of these carbon taxes, by the way. Once Lord Rothschild's bank has had his hands in it for a while, gathering interest in Switzerland, then it gets passed on to the United Nations. So this is another one that's going to be tacked onto the UN as well. It says Cuban dictator Fidel Castro addressing the UN's World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia and Related Intolerance in Durban, South Africa in September 2001 proposed a Tobin tax that would provide the UN with $1 trillion annually. Fidel said, it says here, may the tax suggested by Nobel Prize laureate James Tobin be imposed in a reasonable and effective way. This is Fidel talking on the current speculative operations accounting for trillions of US dollars every 24 hours. Then the United Nations, which cannot go on depending on meager, inadequate and belated donations and charities is multi-trillion foundations, will have $1 trillion US dollars annually to save and develop the world. Ha ha ha. Given the seriousness and urgency of the existing problems, which have become a real hazard for the very survival of our species on the planet, that is what would actually be needed before it's too late. That's what Fidel says. Cuba's erstwhile maximum leader would find few to disagree with him over at the Tobin Tax Campaign and Policy Network, which includes dozens of groups of the far left, such as the National Lawyers Guild, the Institute for Policy Studies, Friends of the Earth, World Federalist Association, Rainforest Action Network, Oxfam, the World Council of Churches. Yep, the world's here. When you join these groups and then you go into conferences that Mr. Rockefeller set up, the World Council of Churches, you're just being used. The Commission on Global Governance as well, and the AFL-CIO. The AFL-CIO, however, apparently realizes that a Tobin tax is more politically feasible if the revenues generated from it are promised to spending on domestic programs rather than the United Nations, though it is not averse to funding UN projects as well. Most news stories paint the Obama administration as being firmly against any type of Tobin tax, with much being made of Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner's reported opposition. By the way, the links are all on this. Even Geithner's reported opposition to Gordon Brown's Tobin tax proposal last November at the G20 summit. Geithner's anti-Tobin comments may or may not reflect genuine opposition by the administration to the transaction tax. There's ample reason for suspecting that the announced opposition is more posturing and maneuvering, and that Team Obama may be planning a strategic flip-flop on the issue, and it will happen. After all, that is what Gordon Brown did before becoming a top Tobin advocate. He was a leading opponent. By the way, it's great in Canada. I can remember when the NAFTA treaty was coming in, after the free trade negotiations had already been done. And I think Brian Mulroney, for the Conservatives, said he was fighting it. He was fighting NAFTA, and that's what he ran his ticket on. And he got in, and 2 weeks after he got in, it was all over the papers. He suddenly changed his mind and was now the leading advocate for NAFTA. And then after all got sick of him and voted in the left wing, the Liberals, then Chrétien, he ran his ticket on the same thing. He was against NAFTA, and sure enough, within a month, he was now the leading advocate for NAFTA. Had a sudden change of heart. So they're all the boys belong to the same club. There's no such thing as left wing and right wing anymore. In fact, there really hasn't been in the past. Really hasn't been. They all get paid to get in there by the same big multi-trillionaires. And you think there's free gifts they're giving them? No, that's a payoff you give them. To do as you're told. And Carroll Quigley said himself, he said that the United States, for instance, and he meant Britain too and a good part of Europe, he says for the last 60 years has been run by this organization. He meant the Council on Foreign Relations, Royal Institute for International Affairs. And he said they always put in the tops for elections, the tops of all parties for elections, he says, and their top advisors are put in there as well, their vice presidents and so on. So it's just been a game for the public to believe in, as they manage us along into this brave new world, but first going into the Orwellian phase of it. It's actually a mixture of the two right now to bring out their final outcome. And that's what we're living through. We're just living through a script, as I say, and they must keep us placated and stupid and dumb with fairly, although minimalistically, plausible answers.